Welcome to Ike's Vintage Tech. If you have an old computer lying around, or in my case, old computer parts lying around everywhere, and you want to turn them into a steam-powered machine, stay tuned. Thanks for watching. If you like seeing me tinkering with these old computers, or in this case, computer parts, please consider subscribing. It'll really help the channel. I also have a Patreon, and I made stickers. It'll help pay for my coffee. Now that the introductions are out of the way, let's talk about what I'm actually doing today. This doesn't look that old, but it is a 16-year-old motherboard. This is a newer GPU. I don't remember the exact date I got it, but it's not that old. This is probably the newest thing in this whole build. It's a GTX 1070. So this by itself is going to be fairly powerful. The only bottleneck would be the CPU. The CPU that's in here is a AMD Phenom 2 X4 965 Black Edition. Let's go over the hardware and tell you exactly what I got. As I said before, we got the Phenom 2 processor. We have 16 gig of DDR3 RAM, a pretty nice motherboard for its time. We have a 1 terabyte SSD, a GeForce GTX 1070, a thumb drive, a regular run-of-the-mill DVD drive, and a 500 watt Thermaltake power supply. Nothing fancy, just bronze, I believe. It's really not a high-end power supply. Cables attached right to it, not modular, but we're doing this to save money, right? Now the case we're using is a Cooler Master case. I don't know the exact model off the top of my head. I pretty much saved it from the scrap pile. And the thing I like about this case, especially when you're doing retro builds, is that it's got a SATA mount on top of the case. So if I want to mess around with Linux, throw Windows Server on here, Windows 98, if I want to try it on here, who cares? I can do it without having to dig into the machine. It's got its own little SATA box right on top. That's great. That saves a lot of time. It saves my patience for one thing, and it just makes the job a lot easier. So let's go ahead and get these parts set to the side, the case down on its side, and we'll get to installing them. All right, so one of the first things I needed to do was I needed to cut the cables loose. They were all zip tied up to whatever motherboard used to be in this. They are going to be a little different. I also had to check the back posts to make sure that the new motherboard lined up with the posts that were in there. There was one that was off. I just had to remove that. Everything else should line up just great. And we can put our little shielding panel right in the back here. Just make sure it's in the right orientation. All right, there we go. It's a little tighter than I liked, but it got in there. And then we got our motherboard. The thermal paste has been reapplied and everything has been nice and greased and good to go. You want to make sure that all your ports line up on the back end side there. And you also want to make sure that none of your cables got caught under the motherboard and that everything is in its right place where it belongs. So I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it does look like the CPU fan cables are going to get caught in the upper fan here. So I'm going to go ahead and rearrange that a little bit. If anything, I'll just get a zip tie and zip it close so that it doesn't actually go in there. I'll do that a little later. Now the board is in, so I take my little bag of random screws. I should have organized these, but everything I need is in this one bag. So I just usually dump it out a little bit and go to town. Also had a friend of mine print this pretty awesome little LTT screwdriver case. It matches the Noctua Brown, and it has all my excess bits for storage right there. It's also a great place to put stickers from my Patreon. Shameless plug. Another great thing about this motherboard, and it seems trivial now, but it came with this little block so that you can plug all of your case internal front panel switch cover stuff right to it without having to get down on the motherboard itself. So you can easily do it where your eyes can easily see what you need to do, and then it plugs right on. Next thing to throw in would be the power supply, now that we got the motherboard and some of the cables routed. So we got this big octopus looking thing right here. Let's go ahead and get that in. The thing I like about this case is it's got these lower pass-throughs for the power supply, and they can come right back up to here, and you can wire all your crap behind and hide the ugly mess when you're done. Next step before I clean all this up is to get the GPU in there. All right, to get this in here, you want to make sure that your slots are open, obviously. We're gonna toss this into the upper slot there. And it should just clip right in. And of course there is a power cable route through the front here. We're going to bring that around back and right up front, nice and clean. And last and honestly least is the DVD drive. We're probably not going to use it, but I don't have a slot cover for this particular case, and I just don't want the mess. So it'll look nice and clean in there, like so. It is a toolless case, so that is nice. All right, we're almost done here. I've got all these cables that are just a little bit of a mess. Now, a lot of people would just hide this in the back, but I got a zip tie gun. Let's put it to use. So the first thing we're going to want to do is untangle the cables that we got here. I believe I've already done a somewhat decent job of that. You don't want cables going up and under through things unless you absolutely have to. This is the CD-ROM cable. I'm going to reroute it with the other cables real quick. All right, that was nice and easy. Let's put it under the audio cable and shove it back in there. Just going to take that first batch right there and put them all nice and tight on that. Now we also have our front panel cables here. We're going to tidy those up real quick. Get it all nice and even best we can. Now I'm not looking for perfection here. That's never possible in cable management, but you want something to look clean and tidy. You don't want it just dangling or getting tangled up with other cables. You do want to try to make it look presentable if somebody were to ever look at it. You don't know who the next person in this build is going to be. You might give it to a friend or relative, or somebody might buy it and go, why did this guy make such a mess? And, I try not to leave a terrible mess. I'm not perfect, but I do like some nice cable management when it's possible. Now the last bit is a bunch of unused cables. So they are going to get tidied up right about here and kind of put behind the drive bays. The great thing about this motherboard is that it actually has a floppy drive connector on it, IDE connector. So it was one of the early SATA, late ATA style motherboards. So I can actually put a floppy drive in this thing, a tape drive. If I wanted to, I have one of those I could put in. And like a modern tape drive. I'm not talking about the old 120 meg or whatever they were. I'm talking an actual real tape drive. So if I really wanted to, I could turn this into a backup server that I can offload a lot of the stuff off my NAS that is taking up space and put it on large format tape drives. All right, here we go. I'm just going to tilt this to the camera quick. It's not perfect, but it's a lot prettier than just dangling there. Quick look at the inside of the case here. It also looks very presentable. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want it to look clean. All right, now that I got the case all sealed up without even trying to turn it on, let's see if it works. I'm going to grab a monitor. Be right back. All right, I finally got this thing back together. I finally got it up and running properly. That's the hard part. I spent about 3 weeks trying to get this thing to boot. Now, 3 weeks sounds like a long time. You got to remember, I only have like 20 minutes a day to really work on this thing when I'm free with kids, family work, all that stuff. And I was trying to get the thing to boot using the hard drive bay up on top here, and I chased the wrong rabbit down the wrong hole. I tried everything. I was trying different partition tables. I tried like 8 different versions of Linux to get this thing to work. Everything I tried failed, and basically the rabbit I was chasing was the BIOS. It's using a legacy BIOS. It doesn't use UEFI. And I thought that was the issue. I was trying everything I could to get this thing to work, and it turned out I just needed to move it to an internal port. It was using the same port, it was using the same cable. It's just this particular dock doesn't like to boot. Nothing you could do about that. What led me to this was I tried to install Windows on here. Now Windows, should work just fine on this thing. It has before. And when I tried to format the drive, it actually said this drive is not bootable. Even after I did all the correct formatting for it, it would not boot. So, basic troubleshooting, I moved it to the inside and everything just worked. It was more work than I needed to put into this. I was about to give up on the video, but I'm glad I didn't. I got it working, and I'm going to show you what it can do now. Let's go ahead and get it booted up. I went ahead and installed Bazzite, the latest version. Now, the hard part about installing Bazzite, and it's not that hard, you just kind of have to know what you have, is when you go to download their operating system, you have several options to install on, and you want to make sure that you choose the right one. My particular one, I have an NVIDIA GPU. It's the GTX 1070 series, so you want to make sure you get the right drivers, the right everything. There's, like I said, there's several flavors of Bazzite you can try, and this is the one that works on this system. Let's take a look. All right, as you can see, it boots right up to the desktop here. Steam is already pre-installed. I went ahead and got all my games installed. I don't have a lot of games that are compatible with Linux, but the ones I do have are good enough. Let's go ahead and open up Steam. One thing you do want to make sure of is that you go up here and make sure that your wired settings are actually on. If you need Ethernet, obviously you do for Steam. You want to make sure that you connect automatically is checked. And that is pretty much everything I need for this. I don't really care about making it available to other users, all that. And now we've got the connection that should come up on boot every time. Let's go ahead and go to our library. And you want to check this little box right here, the little penguin. That's going to show you all your Linux games. Now, one thing I did notice is that some of the games would not load no matter what I did, Portal being one of them. So what you want to do is when you get into the actual options here, you click on Portal, and you go to the little manage gearbox there and go to properties. And because this is an older PC, you're going to want to go ahead and go to compatibility. And I just chose the Proton 3.16 Tech9. That is the oldest compatibility option, considering this is a 16-year-old CPU in here. And it did boot after that. So let's go ahead and take a look at Portal and hit play. Now, any other games you have that aren't going to load, it'll start loading and it'll just fail. So the problem with that is you just need to fix your compatibility and you'll be good. Especially with these older games. This game was new when this PC came out and it should play just fine, but because of updates and everything that has been updated since, sometimes it just won't run on old hardware. But as you can see here, Portal is running just fine. I'm going to go ahead and load a game. I got a save from 2010. So yeah, that's how long I've been playing this game. Go ahead and load it. And I am in this room, if I remember. I don't remember anything about this level, but that is a place where I need to go. So let's jump to that and go here. There we go. The game is running just fine. The frame rate I'd have to look into real quick. Let's see if I can get that up. All right, now that I got the frames per second HUD up, we are looking at a solid 60 frames per second. Almost looks like it's locked at that because it's barely moving. It's keeping right at the 60 frames per second, which is pretty nice considering the age of this machine. I'm not getting any hiccups here. Everything seems to be running smooth and it's pretty nice. Let's go ahead and look down here. Where do I gotta go? Jump. And loading the next screen. And that loading screen went pretty quick. I didn't cut any of that. Anyways, I'm not here to play games. I'm here to show what this thing can actually do. I got Hitman, Half-Life 2, Postal 2, Team Fortress 2. All these games do run now. I did not change anything for Half-Life 2, so I'm going to show you what you do here. Go to Compatibilities. You want to check this box to force use of specific Steam Play compatibility tool. Same as before, I'm going to choose the oldest one. Now you can experiment, see what works, update it as you go. Going to go ahead and force that, exit back out. It is currently going to update, so it has to download some additional resources for that. Once those are installed, this should launch. It is going to process the Vulkan shaders. It may take a while if it's your first time loading the game. After this, it should process a little bit quicker. All right, after all the shaders finally loaded, it took a little while, but the game is launched. It did crash on the first launch. Not sure why, but I hit play again, and this time it loaded pretty quick without the long delay. And it looks like it might have crashed again, so let's figure that one out. Let's go ahead and try to choose a different compatibility. Might be something as simple as that. Let's try a newer one. Let's jump up to 7 and just see what happens. This is all trial and error. All right, here we go again. Let's see if it actually loads or if it crashes. And that's, part of the game here when you're playing with old hardware. You might have to try different things. We have definitely gotten further than we did before. There we go. Let's see if I have any save games here. I don't have any save games there. So let's go back, episode 1. There we go. I do have some loaded games here. Let's just go back to 2014. Alrighty, looks like I brought myself into the middle of the Citadel falling and I'm dead. But yeah, overall, the game looks great. It plays just fine. I'm not playing, extremely difficult settings. Let's take a look at the settings real quick. Options are video settings. I'm playing at, 5120 by 2880 native. 16:9. I could probably change that to a much lower resolution. Either way, it's running great for such a high resolution. Yeah, I've got high model detail, texture detail is high, everything's set to very high. Once again, this is a very old game, so that's just fine. But it is running just great with all these settings, and I'm pretty happy with that. Now, looking at everything I've done to get this running, this is an old machine. It's from 2009. The video card's a little newer, obviously, but it stayed out of the trash. And if you have a kid that wants to play older video games that you have in your Steam library, why not do this? Why get the latest PlayStation for hundreds of dollars more than you want to spend at this moment with this economy and put your old computer back to use? It's perfectly fine for gaming like this. It keeps these things out of the trash, and that's what's important. You can use your old, almost vintage tech and get everything up and running. And this is a prime example of why operating systems like Bazzite, Ubuntu, all the flavors of Linux really extend the life of your old hardware. This is a system that shouldn't be in use at all today, and it's working just fine. The processor for back in the day wasn't the most powerful processor out there. I was just an AMD fanboy at the time, and it is running just fine in 2025, 16 years after I bought it. That just goes to show you, with a lot of the software that we're using today, it is so heavy on resources that there's a development team out there that can really tinker and get the things running on old hardware just fine, and you don't need the latest and greatest $5,000 setup to run your video games. This is exactly what you need if you're on a budget, if you've got old hardware that you don't want to throw out, or if you got kids that you don't want to spend, $5,000 on a gaming PC. Obviously, this is the way to go. So I hope you like this video. Like, subscribe, check out my Patreon. I do have a small Patreon I'm starting up. I have 1 subscriber at the moment, Jon Obst. Thank you for that. I'm going to link his channel down below as well. He has some great material, mostly old vintage Mac stuff, but he does a lot of great videos. He includes his daughter in some of them. My daughter is behind the camera right now watching me do this because it's a sick day. Say hi.
Hi.
See, she's here. I don't like putting her on camera though, but stay tuned for more. I do have a lot more planned. I'm going to make sure that I don't wait another 3 weeks to release a video. This was definitely too long. I just got tied up and I had no time for anything else. But thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and stay tuned. Take care.